Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am your host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is your Midday Market Report for Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. One of my favorite times of the week where I get to pick the brain of one of the best golf PGA experts on the planet, Mr. Brady Kannon, as we were talking backstage. I have the true Scheffler curse. As I stated to him, I had played him back-to-back weeks in my one and dones. And of course, he decides to win this past week. And I was the proud owner of Mr. Scheffler last year. First round leader, doesn't make the cut in my one and done. So needless to say, me and Scott, he is not on my Christmas card list anymore. But hats off to him. He is playing an amazing golf, and I can't wait to hear it from the expert himself, Mr. Brady Kannon.
Well, thank you so much for having me once again, Jeff. And yeah, the Scheffler curse for sure. And it was tough to not land on him last year. He won like 5 times in a span, or won 3 times, I believe, in 5 starts. But you found a way to dodge him, and a tough break indeed. Then he comes back to bite you this year. I was on the show last week and talked about my play on Colin Morikawa. He looked awful good, shooting a 65 in day one, but then never really did a whole lot after that. But thankfully, we were able to cash a top 20 finish with him. Had a real good week with the top 20 finishes. I had 6 plays on outright winners and also had them to finish top 20, and 5 of them came in inside the top 20. And thanks to a lot of carnage there on the 17th hole on Sunday, late in the day, when that wind picked up, we had a lot of guys at 6 under par for the tournament. Jason Day, I can't remember who else exactly, but Patrick Cantlay was another one. And they just squeaked in, tying for 19th with some of that carnage that took place on the 17th hole, guys putting balls in the water and whatnot. So 5 guys finishing top 20. It's kind of hard to not hit an outright when you have 5 of them finishing top 20, but we'll take the profit nonetheless.
We talked last week. I brought it up. I was watching on a show. We'll take it back 2 weeks ago, where on the 16th, you could have got, on Sunday, you could have got Scheffler plus 250, wow, just one shot back. And obviously he didn't win that week. And now you just speed
at Bay Hill you're talking about.
Correct.
Yes.
And now you speed it up a week later. A decent first round, not a great one, not a Morikawa first round, but just, you kind of know it was over on the weekend. I mean, when he gets the blade going and all systems go, he is so tough to beat.
He's the best player in the world right now, right? There's the argument with the big 3, Jon Rahm, Rory McIlroy, and Scotty Scheffler, and they just seem to trade places every other week, it seems. One of them is winning. Rory's been off the boil just a little bit, but we forget, he won a couple of times in the fall season as well, one overseas and one here in the States at the CJ Cup in South Carolina. So those guys, the 3 of them, certainly are the cream of the crop right now, and Scotty currently number 1. And you're right, I didn't see anybody catching him on Sunday at TPC. Dylan Wu made a quick run out of the gate. I think he birdied the first hole. Scotty had a bogey, and all of a sudden he was only 1 back. But I mean, I think Wu ended up losing to Scotty overall by about 10 shots at the end of the day. Tyrrell Hatton was, made some noise there for us. He was one of our plays. And if Scotty, gets into trouble, so many of these guys were making, big numbers, 6s, 7s, and 8s on that 17th hole late in the day. Aaron Rye, Tommy Fleetwood. If Scheffler would have joined that party, our Terrell Hatton play had a real shot. He was the low man in the clubhouse at 12 under. But again, good for Scotty. He put it on there on the green on 17 with no problem, and actually had a really good look for birdie on top of that. But it was another great elevated event, if you will. That was the fourth one we've had this year. We had the tournament the Tournament of Champions at Kapalua to kick off the year. You and I were both on Morikawa again for that one. That was painful, but a fun watch anyway. Phoenix, Scotty Scheffler gets it done in a wild tournament and a wild crowd that always is. Bay Hill was a tremendous finish. You talked about Scotty being just one back there, and then Kitayama gets his first ever PGA Tour win with a really clutch putt on the 18th hole. And then the Players Championship was fantastic as well. A lot of big names on top of that leaderboard. Now we drop off a little bit this week. Still a few big names in the field, but for the most part, a pretty watered down field here at the Valspar.
Yeah, and before we dive into that, for me, and I'm wondering your thought process too, is after the Arnold Palmer, after the TPC, you said there is a letdown here. We're heading to the Valspar, but isn't it for the majority of these guys now really trying to round into form because Augusta is about a month away?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And this is a very difficult golf course too. It's really kind of more of a US Open prep than it is a preparation for Augusta National, Jeff. That's the type of players and the type of golf we see played at the Copperhead course at the Innisbrook Resort, right there in Palm Harbor, Florida, for the Valspar. It's a good tournament. It's a little unfortunate that we don't have a completely star-studded field. Not a bad field, but this is also an opportunity to learn about a lot of guys that you might not know on a first-name basis, if you will. Some of these up-and-comers on the tour that are really making some noise, and again, aren't household names. These are opportunities for us handicappers to kind of keep an eye out for those type of guys. And we're on some of them this week that we'll get to later in the program, but a very good golf course, and it ought to be a fun one to watch. I wouldn't be surprised if the winning score here this week is lower or higher, if you will, than what we saw at another difficult golf course at the Players Championship. Now, obviously, that was a loaded field. Scotty Scheffler, I believe 17 under was the winning score, but I wouldn't be surprised if we had a winning score this week of less than that, say 12, 13, I would say 15 under par, maybe the highest you'll see here at the Valspar. And you've got some wind too, so it might even be single digits. Thursday is supposed to be really benign. That's the day that they're going to have to score. But Friday through Sunday, you're supposed to have wind anywhere from 15 to 25 miles an hour, pretty steady for the final 3 days of the event. So maybe even single digits for a winning score here in play.
I have DraftKings in front of me. I don't want to be rude and look at the Circa app and be looking like this for you for some odds here. Some big names, as you said. Justin Thomas is the favorite at 11-1. Matt Fitzpatrick and Jordan Spieth at 14-1. Sam Burns at 16-1. Tommy Fleetwood quietly seems like he's rounding into a little form at 22-1. Justin Rose and Adam Hadwin at 22-1. Brian Harmon at 28-1. That seems like an outlier to me there. Wyndham Clark and Sue at 3,500 with Denny McCarthy as well. And Gary Woodland at plus 4,000.
Yeah, Gary Woodland, a former winner here, and a little bit atypical for former winners here at the Valspar. You mentioned Jordan Spieth. He's also won here. Of course, Sam Burns is a two-time defending champion. We've talked about this with other golf courses. Bay Hill, I believe, the most recent, where it has strong course history. Guys that play well here typically do so year in and year out, and that's evidenced by the fact that Sam Burns has won here 2 years in a row, and before that, Paul Casey, the Englishman, won here 2 years in a row. Retief Goosen also has a couple of wins at this property. Justin Rose is another guy we'll talk about. He's got multiple top 10 finishes. So again, there is a strong course history here at the Valspar. Unlike TPC last week, where there's no rhyme or reason to who's going to do well year in and year out. Very volatile at the Players Championship. But Gary Woodland, I mentioned Justin Rose, another U.S. Open winner. I talked about this course kind of being more of a U.S. Open prep rather than a prep for the Masters. It's that narrow fairways, ball striking, working the ball in both directions, have a great short game, really more of a U.S. Open type deal. And not surprising that we saw Matthew Fitzpatrick, another U.S. Open winner, take fifth here last year. I mentioned Retief Goosen, a two-time U.S. Open winner. So Jordan Spieth, another U.S. Open winner. So that's another thing to file away from the Valspar this week when all is said and done on Sunday. Take a look at some of the guys that did well here this week, and maybe write some names down for when we get to Los Angeles and start handicapping the U.S. Open.
And speaking of the U.S. Open, before I turn the stage over to you, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Max Homa's college course and holds the course record. Is that correct?
I don't know if either of those are true, but I bet they are. Of course, he went to Berkeley in Northern California. So I don't know if that would be his college course, but I believe he grew up in Southern California. So probably a course he's very familiar with. And I think you are right about the course record. All of that buzz kind of came about Max Homa when he won the LA Open. I still like to call it that, the Genesis Invitational at Riviera. Of course, he's very familiar with, you got these Southern California kids that typically do well at Riviera. Homa, Patrick Cantlay, Brandon Steele's another guy. A lot of, Patrick Cantlay, a UCLA Bruin. So he certainly is very familiar with Riviera and probably familiar with the LA Country Club as well. But you're right. Certainly some strong ties for Max Homa in the entire state of California and probably with that golf course as well.
Yeah, Mass launched 7 apps on Friday, so a lot of the big companies were giving out, I don't like to call them free plays, but DraftKings gave out 8 $25 plays. So I only got them at 25-1 at the U.S. Open, but it was a free $25. I said, why not?
Absolutely. And his odds came crashing down when he won in LA. And that's really true for any major championship. If you see Jordan Spieth win this week or Sam Burns, Justin Thomas, any of the big names that go on to win the Valspar this week, their odds are going to crash for the Masters. That's just a reaction we see all the time. And if you can get out in front of it a little bit, then you're ahead of the game.
All right, I'm going to turn the fairways and the greens over to you. You want to break down potential outrights, some top 20s, and some head-to-heads. The fairway is yours.
All right, my friend. Well, I will start with just the outrights and the top 20s, and that's typically what I do. I usually don't isolate one from the other. If I play them to win the tournament outright, a little bit of an insurance policy. I also play them to finish top 20. The outright market is where I will risk the least amount of money. That's the needle in the haystack. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of glory there. But really, top 20 finishes and head-to-head matchups is where I believe your wiser investments are made. So the outright market will be my lowest amount of risk. I'll do, substantially more on the top 20 finish. And then my largest play is on the head-to-head matchup. But I'll start with the outrights. And of course, these are for top 20 as well. I talked about this course being very U.S. Open-like. Strokes gained approach, incredibly important. Ball striking. Strokes gained around the green, scrambling, that type of thing, incredibly important this week. Strokes gained putting on Bermuda grass. Most of the shots, about a quarter of the shots on this golf course, and it includes the par threes. The par threes at the Valspar, there's actually 5 of them. It's a very unique layout. There's 5 par threes and 4 par fives and 9 par fours. The 5 par threes average over 210 yards in length. So I looked at par 3 scoring between 200 and 225 yards. And then I mentioned the par fives. Those are the easiest 4 holes on this golf course and really your best chance to score. You have to take advantage of the par fives here at Innisbrook. So I looked at how guys do as far as strokes gained on the par fives as well. Good drives gained. I mentioned the narrow fairways. This is a tree-lined course. We typically don't see that in the state of Florida. We see palm trees and water and sand. This actually looks more like a course from the Midwest or something, tree-lined, only 7 holes with water on it this week compared to 17 last week and half the course at Bay Hill the week before. So it's kind of an un-Florida-like golf course here, but those were the skill sets that I looked at this week. And then I came up with Justin Rose, the Englishman, again, a former U.S. Open winner, got him at 22-1. I've seen people grab him at 25-1. That's a really good number. I've also seen as low as 18-1. He finished 6th last week at the Players Championship. Of course, back in February, he won at Pebble Beach. I mentioned his success here at the Valspar, a very repeatable course. He has 3 top 10 finishes here, 2 top 15s, and 2 top 25s. Now, a couple of the correlated courses I used this week were TPC Twin Cities in Minnesota, Muirfield Village, where they hold the Memorial Jacks tournament, and then the RSM Classic down in Sea Island. Justin Rose also has 7 top 10 finishes at the Memorial, including a win. So I think he fits, checks a lot of boxes here this week. His last 36 rounds, he's 20th in this field for strokes gained approach. He's 4th in hole proximity from that 175 to 200 yard distance. I mentioned that being a very popular distance this week for approach shots, including the par 3s. He's 10th in good drives gained. That means he's finding fairways and he's long. And then he is 26th for strokes gained par 5. So Justin Rose on my card. He's my shortest shot. My next shortest shot is Adam Hadwin, the Canadian, at 26-1, a former winner here, also has a 7th and a 12th place finish. He's got 2 top 10 finishes at the 3M Open and 2 top 20s at the Memorial. He was 13th last week at Sawgrass, and that's, again, against a loaded field. So shows that his game is in pretty good form. The last 36 rounds, Hadwin really strong, 6th in this field for strokes gained approach, 10th in par 5 scoring, and 36th for strokes gained around the green. Excellent short game does Adam Hadwin have, and that's what you're going to need this week. So I like him at 26-1. Again, we talked about the repeatable course history here, a guy that's had another guy like Justin Rose that has had a lot of success here at the Valspar. And then Denny McCarthy at 41-1. Really a short game wizard. He was also 13th at the Players Championship. He was 12th on tour, or he is currently 12th on tour in scrambling and 25th in strokes gained putting. Now, it's the ball striking that can sometimes get a little loose with Denny McCarthy, but it was a good sign last week at the Players in that 13th place finish. He was 13th in the field last week for strokes gained off the tee, and he was 24th in greens and regulation. So, you know, we know the short game is there for McCarthy. If he can get the ball striking together for a second straight week in a row, again, against a weaker field, you could see him definitely at the top of the leaderboard. Wyndham Clark also at 41-1. Local Las Vegas resident. Wyndham Clark's a little bit of an anomaly. We don't always see this combination on tour. And when we do, it's lethal. And he is a bomber that also has a really good short game, a deft touch around the greens. You know, usually these bombers are leak a little oil around the greens and with the flat stick and whatnot, but not the case for Wyndham Clark. And this kind of illustrates this. Over the last 36 rounds, he's number 1 in this field for strokes gained on the par 5s, but also 19th in scrambling and 11th in strokes gained around the green. So he's got the length and the short game to make it work here. Back in November, he finished 10th at the RSM, again, a correlated course for us. He was 27th last week at the Players, not too shabby, but he was 10th in the field for scrambling and 4th in strokes gained off the tee. So the game is there. Hopefully this works out for him here at the Valspar this week. Taylor Moore at 60-1. I get into the longer bombs here. Taylor Moore, 60-1. And we talked about it earlier in the program, Jeff. This is a guy, an up-and-comer that you can keep your eye on that might be more of a household name in the near future, especially if he wins this week. He's got 2 top 40 finishes on the Florida swing. He missed the cut last week at the Players, but prior to that, I take that back. He did not miss the cut. He's got top 40 finishes at Bay Hill and at TPC Sawgrass, and both of those were elevated events. So now, again, against a weaker field, he should be able to move up that board even higher. 17th on tour in scrambling, 41st in strokes gained putting. Last 36 rounds, he is second in this field in hole proximity from 175 to 200 yards. So stuffing it in close there on the majority distance that you'll see on approach shots here at the Valspar. Robbie Shelton, another long shot at 90-1. This is the guy that missed the cut last week. But at Bay Hill, he was 39th and he was 21st at the Honda. So, you know, some guys, and we've talked about this as well, Jeff, I'm sorry. Some guys, you know, want to just hone in on that missed cut. But in the case of Robbie Shelton, I think it was just a one-off. He typically has not played well at the Players Championship at Sawgrass, and it was no different this year in missing the cut. But I don't think it means his game is completely off form, as evidenced by a 39th at the Arnold Palmer and a 21st at the Honda. So I think he'll be just fine here. I think this game fits his course, or this course fits his game. He has a 10th place finish at the RSM Classic, a 3rd in Minnesota at the 3M Open. Again, one of my correlated courses. And the last 36 rounds, he is 7th in this field for strokes gained approach and 3rd in strokes gained around the green. So those are two key areas what this week's formula, I believe, will require. And then finally, my longest bomb, I'm into the triple digits here with Alex Smalley at 100-1. Really good ball striker, and he had a great week ball striking last week at the Players Championship. I believe he had a respectable finish. I want to say around 35th or something. Actually, maybe it was even deeper than that. But the putter let him down. He lost over 2.5 strokes to the field with the putter, despite being really good off of the tee. In fact, in that field last week, he was in the top 25, I believe, for strokes gained off the tee. And if you look at the last 8 rounds of this entire field, the last 8 rounds of golf played on both the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour, he is 25th in strokes gained off the tee and strokes gained tee to green. So the ball striking is there. And if the short game shows up this week as well for Alex Smalley, I think he's going to be in contention, and that 100-1 will look awful juicy.
You know, I love the approach too. As you said, you know, it's not one of the stronger fields, almost like, I'm not going to use the word letdown, okay? But as we're getting geared up for Augusta in a month and coming off of the Arnold Palmer, coming off the TPC, a lot of the big names taking the week off, giving these guys an opportunity. So instead of flocking up top to the Justin Thomases and the Fitzpatrick, you really honed in, bang for your buck here.
Yeah. I rarely play the odds-on favorite. And if I do, it's probably at something like the Masters, which of course is coming up in a few weeks. The Masters is typically a pretty chalky tournament. The best of the best usually win there. You have very few, triple-digit long shots that win at Augusta. You only have a field also of typically in the neighborhood of 90 guys. And you can almost throw out about 30 of them. The Ian Woosnams and the Fred Couples, maybe not Bernard Langer. That guy still seems to show up. But you know what I mean. There's a lot of those past champions that aren't likely going to win it again. And then you also have debutantes or first-timers at the Masters. A first-timer at the Masters hasn't won since 1979. So, that's a big chunk of the field that you can kind of kick to the wayside there for the Masters. And it really comes down to a tournament that's probably really only between 30, 40, maybe 50 players. So I will typically land on some chalk for that tournament. I do already have Rory McIlroy at 12-1 in pocket. Now he's even lower than that. He's in the neighborhood of 8 or 9-1 now. But I think to your point, the Masters is a tournament where I'm not too afraid to take 10-1. Lower than that scares me, but 10-1, 15-1, I'm okay doing it at Augusta because of the nature of that tournament. But otherwise, I remember I was on, you remember we've got coming up in a couple of weeks, the Mexico Open at Vedanta. John Rahm was about maybe 6-1. And what'd he do? He went on and won it. Sometimes it's just kind of obvious, but for the most part, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to look a little further down the board and see if I can catch a guy at, 20 to 25-1 or better.
No, and I agree. I was going to add on Saturday, I was looking before they teed off on DraftKings, just looking for the outliers, something that didn't make any sense, hoping that the leaders obviously came down. What didn't make sense to me, Cantlay, who I think was 9 shots back, was only plus 2,800, and it didn't make any sense. I threw one of those $25 free bonus plays, and obviously, thanks for playing. But for myself, who reads the market a lot and looks for those outliers, you're talking my game, Brady. You really are.
Yeah, I was on Cantlay last week, as you know, and thankfully he was able to squeak out a top 20 finish for us. But yeah, he seemed to get some steam last week, and understandably so. He was coming off 2 top 5 finishes at both Bay Hill and the Genesis Open at Riviera. And, he did not have great history at the Players Championship, but he was really playing well and he had a good tournament. He hasn't really had that tournament yet this year where he's really put his foot on the gas. He's been steady. He's finishing top 5, top 10, top 20, and that's who the player he is. I think he's about 4th or 5th in the world rankings right now. So you expect him to do that, but he hasn't quite, like I say, stepped on the gas and really put together a scorching tournament just yet. Maybe it's coming.
Shout out to Mr. Sean Alvarez. Happy Wednesday to you as well. Before we get to the head-to-heads, I know we kind of lean to the right on the Masters. I have to ask you this because I know it's not true value. It's more TV, Hollywood. Again, that's a course where if you either got it or you don't. Is there any way in holy you-know-what that Tiger has an opportunity to put 4 rounds together there, you think?
Well, it's a tough question. I said no in 2019 when he won it. I didn't think he was going to do it last year, and he didn't. I did bet on him at St. Andrews, though. I think I had 75-1, and my rationale there was if he can walk Augusta, and I don't think the game looked that bad. It was the health. It was his legs. Just physically, I didn't know if he could handle the test for 4 days in a row. But, Augusta showed me something last year that he might be able to handle it at St. Andrews, another course that he loves, another course that he knows like the back of his hand, another course that he's won at multiple times. And also it's a course that's very flat. It's not a difficult walk. So, I knew he was a shot in the dark, but I took a stab based on that theory, and he missed the cut. So what's he going to do now? He looked pretty decent at the Genesis. I think he surprised some people with how he did there. I think he can probably win at Augusta any time. I mean, he proved that in 2019 when nobody really believed he could. He's obviously not as healthy as he was 4 years ago. And that's, again, probably the biggest concern, Jeff. I think the game is not too shabby, and probably, he can probably find 4 days a game to put it together there. It's just probably physically, is he healthy enough with the back, the legs, what have you, everything that has ailed Tiger recently.
Head-to-heads for the weekend.
Yes, I've got 3 of them here this week, and I went with where I'm looking here. Okay, so I went with Taylor Moore. I talked about him as far as an outright play. Taylor Moore minus 120 over Ben Griffin. I took Lee Hodges at minus 110 over Webb Simpson. And then my last play, I'm trying to remember here. Okay, Robbie Shelton over Tyler Duncan. Robbie Shelton, I have at even money over Tyler Duncan. So I played 2 guys in head-to-heads that I also have outrights on. And then the last one with Hodges over Simpson, really just a fade of Webb Simpson. He has just been awful for what seems like a couple of years now. He just really hasn't found the game that we saw him not too long ago win at Harbor Town, contend at the Masters, but he's fallen off quite a bit. And I'm going to hope that continues. Not rooting against the guy, but I'm going to root for Lee Hodges to get past Webb Simpson this week.
Next week, where does the tour go?
We go to the Dell Match Play, and Jeff, maybe we need to schedule our podcast next week for Tuesday because they start on Wednesday. Perfect. I love the Match Play, and here's a good disclaimer for everybody out there listening and watching. The Match Play is an extremely difficult tournament to bet. It's a ton of fun because it's match play. So every shot, your wager is on the line. These guys are only playing 18 holes at a time. It's not over the course of 4 days. And sometimes they aren't even playing a full 18 holes if one guy closes the other player out prior to finishing all 18. So every shot is important. The drama is great from a betting standpoint. I've talked about this on your program before, and we just talked about head-to-head matchups. That's essentially what these are, head-to-head matchups. And you're not going to have head-to-head matchups next week created by the odds maker. You're going to have actual head-to-heads, whoever, Jordan Spieth against Justin Thomas. They probably will not be paired until later on, but the point is you're not going to have fictional matchups. These are actually going to be mano-a-mano that you can see on TV. So even more fun from a wagering aspect. But as I mentioned, I've talked about this before. I like to bet full tournament head-to-head matchups because all the skill sets that I look at, all the criteria that I look at for the entire week, I feel that has a much better chance to develop and manifest over 4 days. And when you're playing the match play, it's like betting an individual round matchup, which for me are much more difficult. And I believe it's much more random. A guy can get hot for 18 holes and win a match. But over the course of 4 days, player B might beat him over the long haul. So the individual isolated match for me is very difficult. So I would tread lightly on the match play. It's tough to bet outrights because at any given time, a guy can get knocked out. And again, one guy gets hot, the other guy has an off 5 holes, and next thing you know, the match is over. So it's a tough one to bet for sure. Great tournament to watch. I love it. I love the excitement of it and the instant drama with every shot mattering. But again, a tough one to bet. I would tread lightly.
Well, I'll definitely clear the desk for Tuesday at 3:00 if you're available. We'd love to have you come on before this starts on Wednesday. I think a few years back, your memory's better than mine, I was able to catch lightning in a bottle. Francesco Molinari had an amazing run. I usually land in Vegas for the first weekend for the March Madness and the start of baseball. I will not be out there this year, but I remember catching that tournament as we came in, and he had an amazing run. It was a handful of years ago.
Yeah, I vaguely remember. And, that's one way you want to try handicapping this event. And I think it's one of the lesser predictable golf tournaments that we have on the schedule. But if you're going to dive in, look at Ryder Cup success. Francesco Molinari, he's been a Ryder Cupper, I would imagine at least a handful of times. I don't have it in front of me, but he's got experience in that type of match play, one-on-one format that they will play next week at Austin Country Club. Sergio Garcia was another guy that was terrific and a great Ryder Cup player. Ian Poulter. Now, Sergio and Ian, they went to the dark side. They won't be there. But that's a good way to look. Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, those guys have been great Ryder Cup players in their careers. So, and President's Cup too. You can look at that and how those guys fare in that match play situation. So that's a good place to start for your handicap of next week's event.
The scroll has been going the whole time. If you're not following, please go to Las Vegas Golfer. You can find Brady's work at golf_com, GolfBet, PGA Tour, the Sports Grid. I love to finish with handing the mic to you and tell everyone else where to find your work.
Yeah, thank you very much. On Twitter at Las Vegas Golfer. That's probably the best place to see everything I'm publishing. You mentioned for the PGA Tour, their betting division called GolfBet, golf.com. And then on Wednesdays, later this evening, I'll be on Sports Grid to preview the Valspar. I also go on Sports Grid on Saturdays for kind of an in-game look, Sirius XM channel 159. And then also on Sundays for a little bit of a recap and a look ahead to the next event. Jeff, before we get out of here, I do have 4 plays on the first round leader. Now, I talked about the match play being a tough tournament to bet. The first round leader is another market that I don't advise to invest heavily in. It is a big crapshoot. It's got the largest hold percentage of just about any market, if not the very most of any market when you're betting a golf tournament. It is truly a needle in a haystack, but it's fun. Like I talked about with the match play, instant gratification, somewhat similar with the first round leader. And I played a couple of guys that I landed on for outrights. I played Justin Rose at 33-1. If you look at what Rosie has done in first round scoring, he's 38th on the tour, 22nd in birdie average, 41st in bogey avoidance. Those are areas that I think add up to a good chance on a first round leader, making birdies, not making bogeys, and average a first round score that ranks high amongst your peers in the PGA Tour. So Rosie there. Also Wyndham Clark, another guy I played for an outright at 42-1. Wyndham Clark, 23rd on tour in first round scoring, 24th as far as number of rounds in the 60s, 24th on tour. Denny McCarthy, another guy we're on for the entire tournament. And I don't think that's bad to be on guys for both of these markets, because if you get out to a first round lead, you're probably, the chances are you're going to be close. Typically, they don't, go south in a hurry if you get out to that lead on Thursday. McCarthy also at 42-1, 13th on tour in first round scoring, 23rd in bogey avoidance, and 17th in rounds in the 60s. And then finally, a longer bomb, a guy that we went against in a head-to-head matchup, but Ben Griffin at 52-1. Griffin really good as far as, the stats I look at for first round leaders. 6th on tour in first round scoring average, 20th in birdie average, 31st in bogey avoidance, and he is second for the number of rounds in the 60s on tour.
Amazing work, and shame on me for trying to cut this short. I forgot about the first round leaders. And that was
it's a little bit of a throwaway bet, but it's fun.
No, and it's funny. You talk about the instant gratification, and I know a lot of people. I know some people in these lanes that concentrate more on the first round leaders, and then we'll go into the head-to-head and props because they think it's easier to focus in on just one round versus trying to figure this thing out for 72 holes.
I understand it. I explained it. I expect a player's skill set and what they typically do well to eventually manifest over 4 days rather than just 1 day. So for me, I like to go the long haul rather than try and, I have often equated it to betting just 1/4 of a football game. If the New York Jets and their new quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, you expect how they're going to play over the course of 4 quarters, but you don't know necessarily what they're going to do in the third or the first or the second. You hope that it'll play out over all 4 frames. But for me, it's tough to pinpoint what's going to happen in just an isolated quarter of the contest.
Yeah, I used to really try to excel on those first half plays, whether it's in football or whether it's in basketball, by the inflated numbers up or down. And I think there's too much. You're trying to go upstairs. You're assuming Duke's going to come out guns a-blazing. They just lost 2 in a row. They're coming out guns a-blazing, and they're coming back home, and they fall flat. And then the second half, they outscore the team by 25, and they cover the whole game. So it's kind of one of those, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
The other thing too, the odds maker is probably more adept with power ratings and setting a number on what the game or the golf tournament or whatever, what the right number is over the course of 4 days. Now, there's 2 ways you can look at this. The number they're setting for first round leader or a first round matchup may not be as accurate. So maybe you can take advantage of that. But I just think it speaks to the difficulty of pinpointing one match versus a power rating system, whatever you use, where that basically speaks to the entire tournament or game.
I 100% agree. And I got notebooks on more notebooks each week that I'm gathering from your skill. And I can't thank you enough, sir.
You're the best, man. I appreciate you having me every Wednesday and maybe a Tuesday next week.
The one and only Brady Kannon. Again, go follow him at Las Vegas Golfer later tonight. Go catch him on the grid. And as he said, Saturday on Sirius XM 159 and Sunday on the Sports Grid. And God willing, we will be back Tuesday around 3 p.m. before the Wednesday start of the match play. Everyone else, stay tuned and we'll see you soon.